This story is from my stepdad, who at the time lived in California from a young age into his teens. It was in the 70s when he and his family lived in Desert Center, California. My stepdad, Jake, is guessing he was about 10, old enough to play on his own and be trusted to stay close to home when out with friends. Where could they go, really? It was a pretty isolated out there, and there was nothing really to do anyway, so this all loops into the story though, I promise. So, this Saturday was like any other weekend. Jake got to have a friend over for the night, a kid named Randy. The plan was dinner, movie, games, then bedtime. When dinner wasn't quite ready, both kids were getting antsy inside the house, asking Mom to play outside till dinner was finished cooking. They got permission, and they ran out into the early evening. The backyard was desolate, open and prepped with an old broken-down car, ideal for makeshift jungle gyms for two 10-year-old boys. For the next few minutes, they were just playing away, and simultaneously, they both were sharing a paused look before they turned their heads up to the sky. My dad just remembers light circling above them. The ship was round and silent. He and Randy were both transfixed on it. Neither of them moved, and they were still as statues with no fear, just watching what was happening in front of them. It was so odd and random, and then it was gone. Both Jake and Randy blinked at each other again, and then hear the rage in Jake's father's voice.
"Where the hell have you been?"
Jake replying, "We've both been here the whole time, Dad."
"The hell you have. You're both an hour late for dinner. I've been out here twice to check for you boys, and neither of you were out here."
Over an hour of Randy and Jake's memory were gone. They both have zero recollection of what happened for the last hour. My dad still swears he doesn't remember a thing other than playing outside, seeing the shape and the lights of something unidentifiable, and his father never believed that Jake or Randy never left the property. To this day, his dad still thinks both boys snuck off somewhere to get into mischief. After another year, my stepdad and his family moved away and didn't return to the same location till he was about 15. And when the family returned, my stepdad went straight to see Randy. Not a moment after the basic questions of hello, how are you, did Randy ask, "Hey, you remember the sleepover at your place?" Jake replying, "Yeah man, but I don't remember entirely everything, just the lights." Randy said, "Same here." So that's my stepdad's encounter with an other kind. He remembers something without actually remember everything, except that his father was very pissed for a while after that. He also lived in a haunted house as well, but I still have to get more details on that one.
At the time of this story, I was a few months into an undergraduate degree in Austin, Texas, and had just become comfortable enough with myself to come out of the closet. At the time, there were no dating apps available, so to find dates, I used Craigslist, something which I would later learn would be a big mistake. I started chatting with a guy off Craigslist, Craig, and we hit it off, and decided to set a time and place to meet in person. His advert said he was 27, and I was 18 at the time. At first, he was very insistent on meeting at his place, which I later found out was just a trailer. And it kind of made me suspicious, but in his pictures, he was very good looking and had a nice smile, so I decided to just let it go. Eventually we agreed to get coffee before going to his place. So the day I arrived, and I went to get coffee, and was pretty excited. I had showed my roommate pictures of Craig, and talked about how I was looking forward to meeting him. I showed up to the coffee shop, and he was already there. He actually did look like his pictures, so that was a good start. We got coffee, and ended up chatting for several hours before he asked whether I wanted to go back to his place. Luckily, my roommate called to check up on me, and it also happened that he was stranded because his car had broken down. So I told Craig that I would take my friend back home before heading over to his place. Well, by the time I picked my friend up, Craig was no longer answering his phone and/or texts. When he finally answered, he accused me of making up some excuse so I wouldn't have to go back to his place with him, and basically was very angry and annoyed despite our great conversation earlier. I was a bit bummed, but basically didn't think of him again until years later, when my old roommate sent me a link for a news article about Craig. Apparently, he had been running a sex trafficking ring, using underage boys that he would lure through his good looks and promises. I can only imagine what would have happened to me if I'd have gone back to his trailer with him that day. Reading that article gave me serious chills.
My mother tried her best to keep me and my brother Miles out of the woods behind our house. It was too dangerous, she'd sigh. We could trip and fall and hurt ourselves. We could get lost. 2 little boys could get into all kinds of trouble out there. She went so far as to have an 8-foot fence around the backyard, and she padlocked its gate. For some, that may have been enough, inconvenience killing curiosity, but for me and Miles, it only made what laid beyond all the more tantalizing. It was weeks before we finally got our chance to sleep out of the front door. Mom was distracted with an overflowing toilet, and Miles looked at me with a conspirator's nod over his shoulder, signaling the time had come. We crept along the hall, down the stairs, and across the foyer, where we grabbed our hats and jackets before making a break for it. It was a cool autumn day, and the leaves scratched noisily beneath our feet as we rounded the house. We were moving fast, nervous that Mom would realize we'd disappear, and we crossed through the tree line at a near sprint. The light afternoon sun spilled through the leaves in glittering columns, casting the woods in a golden flow, and I followed Miles with a wide-eyed grin, both nervous about breaking the rules and mesmerized by this forbidden place. My big brother took the lead, carelessly stopping his way through the underbrush. We ran and climbed over fallen trees and laughed, unconcerned with the passing of time, or that Mom might become worried. We were too enveloped in our mischief. A gentle incline took us down to a stream, and we trailed along beside it for a time, pausing occasionally to skip any suitable stones we found along the way. "Do you think Mom's gonna be really mad?" I asked. For the first time since we made our escape, I'd taken a good look around, while Miles lined up another rock and realized that our house and its fence were no longer in sight. I wasn't even certain which direction we'd come from. The woods suddenly seemed so much bigger, intimidating, even, and I felt very small. Miles clapped me on my shoulder and grinned with all the confidence of a 10-year-old boy who knew he was up to no good, but was certain he could talk his way out of it. "It will be fine, Warren. We'll go back soon. She probably hasn't even noticed that we're gone." I nodded, smiling as well. If Miles said it was okay, then it had to be. And onward we went, but Miles hadn't taken into account just how far we really had wandered, or just how late it really was. We had just started talking about turning around when the sun, and the temperature along with it, began to sink. As the shadows began to grow around us, I grabbed Miles' hand and clenched in between my own. Usually, he never would have let me do that, but just then, he held on as tightly to me as I did to him. "Come on," he said, the bravado from earlier fading as quickly as the light around us. It's this way." We doubled back, following the stream, until we reached his head again, and he started to lead me up to the slope. Behind us, twigs snapped. I wiped my head around, but I couldn't see anything in the gloom that had settled across the woods. "It's nothing," he assured me, "just a squirrel or something." I nodded, not entirely convinced, and we started to climb again. Another twig snapped, this one closer. "Miles?" I whispered nervously. "It's nothing," he said again. The crunch of leaves being crushed slowly beneath a heavy footfall sounded right behind me. I screamed, and Miles yelled for me to run. He hauled me the rest of the way up the incline and threw me in front of him. I scrambled, I found my footing, and I was off. I could hear my brother, his panicked breathing, and I dared to look back at him. His face was pale, his eyes were dark, and over his shoulder, outlined against the night, something was following, something big. I turned back around and shrieked again. My legs pumped furiously beneath me, but I still felt slow, and I kept stumbling on the uneven ground. Miles shoved me along more than once, shouting for me to go. Over our frantic cries, I could hear the thing behind us. It dragged, deep breathing, pounding footsteps, and the smell, a cloying, rotting odor that stung my eyes and made it harder to breathe. My chest burned, my eyes stung with tears. I wanted to scream for my mother, but nothing would come out. Low-lying tree branches, invisible in the dark, clothed my clothes. If Miles hadn't been behind me, forcing me to keep going, my terror might have kept me rooted in place. I might have given up. "Warren? Miles?" It seemed like such a distant call, but we both recognized our mother's voice instantly. "Mommy?" I screeched. "Mommy, help!" Up ahead, still a fair distance away, I could see red and blue lights flashing through the trees. I could see the lights from the upstairs window of our house. "Mommy!" I screamed again. "Mom!" Miles joined in. "Boys!" Beams of light turned towards us, and the radio crackled. "We found them," a man's voice said. We collapsed into our mom at the edge of the woods, and all three of us fell to the ground, clinging to each other. "We are sorry," I sobbed into her shoulder. "We were being chased. Something was after us," Miles said at the same time. The cops Mom had called to look for us, who had gathered nearby and were within earshot, immediately turned their flashlights back towards the woods. They shined them slowly across the trees. Their eyes narrowed slightly, but all they found was empty forest. "Oh no," Mom breathed softly. "Mommy?" I looked up at her and was confused by her expression, a thin-lipped, tight mask of fear. She gathered us up and half dragged us back towards the house, leaving the police still searching the darkness. "What's wrong, Mom?" Miles asked. "Why couldn't you do as I say?" she moaned. "Why couldn't you stay in our yard?" "We are sorry," I said. "We won't do it again." "Oh, baby." She glanced down at me. "You won't even know what you've done. It wasn't you going into the woods that was the problem." She hurried us inside and slammed the door behind us, turning the deadbolt into place before looking at us again. "It's what you let back out." Outside, just beyond our fence, the cops began to scream.
I have worked as an apprentice in a small hotel called Hotel Stardust for almost a year now. It is located right outside of Melbourne, next to an old road. When I started my apprenticeship in Hotel Stardust, the road was very busy, and business here flourished. But since the new highway was opened, The amount of customers has decreased week after week. And the evening that this happened, there were only 3 customers here. A young couple and old Bill, who was our regular. He liked to sit at the reception desk, drink cheap beer called Murphy's, and occasionally chat with me. The hotel owner, a lovely old lady called Teresa, was sleeping upstairs. The young couple who arrived yesterday were nowhere to be seen. Me and Bill were sitting at the reception desk whilst the hall light flickered, like so many nights before. It was getting late, and I told Bill to finish his beer and get going, because I had to close the place for the night, as Bill lived in a small apartment nearby. Bill nodded and took a sip of his Murphy's. I went to close the back door. I had given the young couple a back door key and told them to come in through the back if they came to the hotel late, so I didn't really think about them. When I came back to the desk, where Bill still was, sipping his beer, the lights suddenly went out. The old fluorescents had been flickering for the whole time that I had worked there, but this was the first time it had done this. I took a small flashlight from behind the desk and went to the back room. The backroom lights wouldn't turn on either. I went to look through the window and saw the road lights still illuminated. Must have been the generator, I thought, and started climbing the stairs. Bill just sat there, still sipping his Murphy's. The building had 3 floors and a small generator room on the roof. I climbed all the way up, opened the door to the generator room, and started investigating the generator. It had stopped, and whatever I tried, I couldn't understand why. Working with just a small flashlight was difficult, and investigating the generator took a long time. Just as I was almost done, I heard a noise from inside. Someone was walking in the creaky staircase. "Bill?" I shouted. Nothing, just more creaking. "Teresa?" Still nothing. "Mark? Amanda?" As those were the names of the young couple, but they didn't answer either. I closed the door to the generator room, still having found no answer to why it didn't work, and went back inside. I pointed my flashlight at the staircase and nobody was there. On my right was Teresa's room. The door was shut, and on my left there was a short hallway with 6 rooms for guests. Most of them were always empty, but the young couple's room was also there. Room number 15. The door was wide open. "Mark? Amanda?" Bill shouted from downstairs. "What's up?" I shouted back. Did Mark and Amanda come back while I was up there?" "Nope, I didn't see anyone," Bill replied. "Let me check something," I told Bill, and I slowly walked towards the open door. While checking every corner with the flashlight, I got to the door and peeked inside. It was pitch black, so I pointed my flashlight at the darkness, and to my horror, I saw myself standing in the room, staring me right in the eye, without any emotion on my face. His face? My face? I jumped backwards and tried to calm myself. I felt shivers down my spine. It must have just been a mirror, I thought to myself. It must be. I slowly sneaked back to the door and took another peek. The room was empty. Just the young couple's bags, opened on the floor. I shined the flashlight around looking for the mirror, but I couldn't find one. I stammered the door shut and ran back to the stairs. I looked downwards and saw the reception hall, but it wasn't dark, with just Bill sitting at the desk. The hall was full of people, and there was a huge chandelier hanging from the ceiling. I didn't recognize any of the people in the hall, but they must have been guests of the hotel. Many of them had bags with them, and I stood there for a while, watching the hall full of talking and laughing people. The people's clothes didn't look modern. They looked like the clothes from an old movie. A young man next to the desk turned on his chair. Even from up here I could see the beer bottle in his hand. I recognized the brand. Murphy's. No one else seemed to notice me, but the man next to the desk looked at me straight in the eye and winked. I closed my eyes and shook my head rapidly, and when I opened my eyes, the people had disappeared, along with the huge chandelier, and the hall was dark again. As I pointed my flashlight to the darkness, I heard the generator turn on again behind me, and the lights came back on. The old fluorescent started flickering again, and the chair next to the desk was empty. We never saw Bill
Wait,
again.
is it closed? The gate to the beach was padlocked with numerous no-swimming signs stuck to it. You didn't hear? Alex said, puffing himself up, as if he were suddenly an adult. It was all over the news. Some guy drowned here last week. We can still get in. Eric ducked under the gate. Come on, or are you guys chicken? We followed him onto the beach. The sand burnt my feet, hot from the afternoon sun. The lake was dark and murky, reflecting the cloudless sky like a mirror. They recovered the body though, right? I said, carefully poking a toe into the cold water. What? Are you afraid he's gonna get you? Alex accused. Then he ran into the lake at full speed, kicking up the water behind him. I bet he drowned, 'cause a huge snapping turtle got him, Eric said. He put his hands together and clapped them aggressively in my face. Then he followed Alex, whooping all the while. The two of them splashed and hollered at each other, swimming towards the middle of the lake. I slowly waded out to them. The icy water burned my legs. Alex and Eric were a good 50 feet away, laughing hysterically over a joke I couldn't hear, so I waded further out, all alone. When the ground fell away from my feet, I lifted my body and floated on the surface. As my head dipped underwater, the splashes and shouts silenced. All I could hear was underwater gurgling, the pounding of my heart, and a melody. I yanked my head out of the water, but as soon as I did, it stopped. Nothing could be heard except for the faint splashing of Eric and Alex in the middle of the lake. I dipped my ear back in. There it was again. Ahead of me, the water rippled. My heart began to race. The sound now came from behind me. I wiped around. It was not a snapping turtle or a monster. It was a woman. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, she said. And she was beautiful. Of course, any woman is beautiful to a 13-year-old boy, but still, her long black hair fell in waves towards the water, where it disappeared under the sun's reflection. Her skin was a deep coffee brown, and her shoulders were bare except for 2 white straps. I'm Matthew, I replied. Isn't it beautiful? She said, glancing out the water. The lake in the late afternoon? I nodded. Why are you alone? I am not. I'm here with my friends, I said, motioning to Alex and Eric. They were so far away now, they were just 2 little fleshy dots, breaking the mirrored reflections. If they are your friends, why aren't you hanging out with them? They kind of left me alone, I said, squinting on the sun. She nodded in understanding. The bright sun continued to blind me, and then squinting was getting tiring. Sorry, the sun's in my eyes, I said, swimming a few feet over. My shadow fell over the lake between us, erasing the bright reflections of the sky, and underneath the water, her torso faded into dark purple scales and shimmered in the murky water. Her hands ended in sharp black claws, and her hair. Her arms showed up, looking on my shoulders. Above the water, they had turned back to normal. No claws, no scales. I let out a scream, and then my head plunged underwater. My face stung with the cold. Bubbles flew out of my nose. I thrashed my arms and legs wildly, trying to kick free, but it was no use. The last thing I remembered was a dark shape rising out of the muck, coming towards us. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the shore. Alex and Eric were bent over me, pale and frantic. "Are you okay? What happened? I thought you were a good swimmer." The barrage of questions did not stop until I held up a hand in front of them. "It was the woman," I said, shaking my head. "She pulled me down and—" "What woman?" I can tell from their wide eyes that they had no idea what I was talking about. "All we saw was a man pulling you to the shore," Alex said. When I was 11, my dad and I tried to make our own maple syrup. I don't know how he convinced me of such a project, but somehow he did. So one chilly February morning, we woke up early and went out to the large maple tree in the backyard. Setting up the tap was easy. Dad drilled the hole and we hammered the spile in together. Within minutes, clear sap was dripping into the soda bottle we attached. "Check the bottle each morning," Dad said with a smile, "and write down how much we collected." "It's the coolest project ever," I told my friend Shelby on the bus to school. It felt good to put her in her place. She was always bragging about how she lives on a farm. "Dad lets me feed the pigs and milk the cows," she would say, flipping her hair. "And he pays me for it. I basically have a job, and I am only 12. But her dad was a total weirdo. Mine was cool, and gave me cool projects to work on. Anyway, on the morning of February 27th, I approached the tree as usual, skipping in the snow, humming "Walking on Sunshine" through the heavy scarf around my face. I walked around to the top and peered in. I gasped. The bottle was halfway filled with dark reddish liquid, not clear sap. I ran back to the house. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled. "There's something wrong." Dad followed me out into the backyard, not looking very concerned. I don't blame him. Last time I pulled him out here, it was because I found monster footprints in the snow, also known as raccoon footprints. "The syrup is dark now," I said, pointing rapidly at the bottle. "What happened? Did we rain it?" To this day, I don't think I've seen my dad so shocked. His face went white, matching the surrounding snow, and his mouth hung open. It's fine," he stuttered, pulling the bottle from the tree. "But I'll bring it in and take a look at it." He detached the bottle and brought it inside. I followed. "Go get ready for school. I'll take care of this." "I am ready," he sighed. "Go, get me the encyclopedia from my study, will you?" As I walked down the hall, Mom's whispers to him echoed towards me. "What is it?" "I don't know." A sharp inhale. "It smells metallic-y. What do you think?" "I'm not sniffing that." "Okay, fine." I knew this whole maple syrup was dumb. The tree is probably diseased or something. Don't let her near it. "Okay, but—" "And get the rest of it out of our basement. I don't even have enough space for laundry anymore." I walked back into the kitchen with the encyclopedia, and they fell silent. "I'll drive you to school," Mom said, grabbing her keys and shooting a glare at Dad. When I got home, they seemed even more stressed. "Michaela," Dad said, sitting me down, "don't go near the tree, okay?" "Why?" Just don't, okay?" Apparently, my dad did not understand the concept of forbidden fruit. Now that he said it, I had to go back to the tree. So after my parents went to bed that night, I snuck out of my room, grabbed a flashlight, and ran into the backyard. It was bitterly cold, and the icy wind blew through my pajamas, but I soldiered forward until I was standing underneath a maple. As the beam of light fell over it, I saw a long red streak staining the bark, emanating from the spile, as if it were bleeding. I touched my fingers to it. They came away wet and red, and a chill coursed through my body. Blood? Is that what the dark stuff was? I walked around the tree, my flashlight bouncing off the bark. As I did, I realized there was a deep crack that ran horizontally across it, but it was too long, too perfect to be a natural crack. The bark shifted and jiggled. I jabbed my fingernails in it and pulled until a large panel of bark fell away. It hit the snow with a dull thump, and I screamed. Stuffed into a cavity of the trunk, still and lifeless, was the carcass of a pig, and in its belly was a small hole where the spile had been attached. I leaped back from the tree, screaming. The beam of my flashlight caught on the snow, and in it there was a fresh set of footprints leading up to the tree, but none leading away. I sprinted across the snow. I locked the door behind me, and then I glanced out of the window. In the darkness, I could make out a shadow climbing down from the branches of the maple tree.